Now for our feature story of the day. Bitcoin to 1 million per coin. Samson Mow reveals his timeline. So I'll be sharing a couple of recent tweets from the founder of Jan3. Shout out Samson Mow, helping usher in nation state Bitcoin adoption with many heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, etc., including, Prime Minister of Japan, the president of Colombia, the senator over in Mexico, etc. So shout out again to Samson. He recently tweeted, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that you'll always be able to buy Bitcoin with fiat. And I dare say the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing you that Satan did not exist." And someone responded here. So you're calling for Bitcoin equals infinity and Euro Bitcoin equals infinity. Now I'm curious, what's a Euro Bitcoin? And so on. So how far do you see into the future? Josh Mann writes, "I can sometimes see out a year, but I think that's been more helpful to me than 1,000 years or whatever. Even when Saylor says 13 million, I think that's pretty far off and not at all a straight line." Well, never a straight line. "Can you tell me when 1 million? As for me, I will be taking some chips off the table at 440,000. Easy to say, never sell your biddies when you have plenty of fiat to buy groceries with." And he makes some good points here. And I'm also curious, do you guys have like a certain fiat value that once Bitcoin hits it, you're also going to be, taking some chips off the table, maybe to, pay off your mortgage or do something with? Let me know. I'm curious. Samson Mow responded right here. "My model says 1 million in 2031. So according to his model, 2031. But his feeling, which trumps his model, says this year or next. So he's still a firm proponent that we're in a bull cycle clearly, and that we're yet to hit the cycle peak, and he still firmly believes we'll hit it this year, and if not this year, in 2025. It would prove the theory of the extended bull cycle, because this would be the first time we don't peak out the year preceding the halving. We all know we had the halving, I think it was April 19th of last year. So typically, if history is to rhyme, we'd see the peak this year. So he's also a proponent that we have an extended super cycle. And so She Bitcoins responded, "You mentioned that sometimes you can't fill a bid. Isn't it fair then to say it'll become difficult for the average person to buy a meaningful amount of Bitcoin? Sure, they'll be able to collect sats, but I liken it to collecting gold dust." And she makes some good points too. It will become increasingly more difficult, especially with a legitimate supply shock. I mean, anything can happen. And looking at some other recent tweets from Samson, he wrote, "The U.S. digital Fort Knox will now be called Fort Nakamoto." I'm all for that. Let's update it from Fort Knox to Fort Nakamoto, especially after we audit it and see that the gold is missing. What are your thoughts on that? And he says, "I have spoken. Fort Nakamoto. Send it." Now, also, what's more likely, he tweeted a couple of days ago, Saylor goes from 500,000 to 1 million Bitcoins, or the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve accumulates 1 million coins. Between those two, what do you think happens first? I'm going to speculate Saylor gets to 1 million coins first, though I would prefer the United States to get to 1 million coins first. And let me give you my logic, because Saylor's purchasing insane amounts of Bitcoin and just made an announcement of raising another 21 billion in convertible notes. And once you put 21 more billion into buying Bitcoin, it's going to shoot right on up to the 700,000 range. So Michael Saylor could realistically achieve 1 million Bitcoin status before the end of the year. And that's probably his goal. The U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve for the United States, I think it's going to take a longer time because it has yet to still be approved by like the Senate and Congress. And even though Cynthia Lummis is proposing for it, I believe their plan, which originally was read at the conference last year, was acquiring 200,000 new Bitcoin per year. So that's like a 5-year plan. So I'm pretty positive Saylor's most likely going to hit 1 million coins before the U.S. And we'll continue. U.S. Bitcoin bonds buy 200 billion of Bitcoin and 2 million coins if at 100,000. I mean, do you think the government will likely do that? I mean, I think they should. It's the hardest asset to ever exist. Not only should they do that with these Bitcoin bonds, they should also offload their gold and trade it into the hardest asset ever created. And they should also print the money out of thin air on one of those 14 computers. Elon Musk just came out and disclosed that the U.S. government has 14 magical computers that just like to print money out of thin air. Well, convert that money out of thin air into the hardest asset to ever exist. And why not? Bitcoin goes to 1 million fast. It can happen. It absolutely can happen. But the $1 million question, when will it happen? Will it happen this year? Will it be faster than most people's expectations, or will it be a long, steady ride? Maybe in the year 2030, as Kathy Wood or other models are projecting. Let me know your thoughts. Another positive, powerful post he wrote. Some Bitcoiners are saying the strategic Bitcoin reserve doesn't do anything because it's just seized assets and they are not buying. And I'm also getting this feedback a lot as well from people I know, and they're missing the boat. So let's break this down. Well, there will be buying. There are a number of budget neutral ways. That's the key word. They're allowed to acquire Bitcoin as long as it doesn't cost taxpayers any money, which would be a budget neutral way to acquire Bitcoin, such as issuing Bitcoin bonds or selling gold. Give it some time. Howard Lutnick will get her did. Next, the significance of the strategic Bitcoin reserve creation is immense. The test legitimized Bitcoin as an asset class, that's a good point, and opened the door for institutional investments. Today, with the stroke of a pen, the POTUS has equivocated Bitcoin with gold. Digital gold, baby. The strategic Bitcoin reserve is a digital Fort Knox, Fort Knoxamoto. Let that sink in. The real race for the nation-state BIDI adoption really begins. The strategic Bitcoin reserve also means we will finally get an official audit. About time. For how much Bitcoin the U.S. actually has. Every figure we have now is simply an estimate, and we know the U.S. Marshals have been selling off Bitcoin for the last few years. So the truth is we really don't know how much Bitcoin the U.S. really has in their possession. It is likely the U.S. has 112,000 Bitcoin or less, because 95,000 of those Bitcoin belong to Bitfinex and will be returned. It does not have the 207 to 220,000 Bitcoin number that many news sites repeat each and every day. This would put China in pole position with 194,000 Bitcoin, making China the leader of the world when it comes to Bitcoin adoption. And again, North Korea potentially then the second. They have more Bitcoin than the United States if we put it all into perspective. Now, you can imagine that why that won't be acceptable. With Bitcoin being deemed as strategic, the U.S. will want to have the most. There will definitely be an audit of the supply, and then adding to it, competition is good for Bitcoin, hence the term global hash wars, coined by Max Kaiser, which is a fancy term for game theory, because now the Bitcoin made the announcement, now that the United States made the announcement of stacking the BIDI, many other countries are likely doing the same thing behind closed doors. And as you can see here, United States, roughly 112,000 Bitcoin, El Salvador, over 6,000, the UK, 61,000, as we mentioned yesterday. North Korea, thanks to their infamous Lazarus hacker group, they now have like close to 200,000 Bitcoin, making them one of the largest in the world. And then you have the Kingdom of Bhutan, 13,000 Bitcoin. Finland, just shy of 2,000 Bitcoin. The Ukraine, 46,000 Bitcoin. And again, China, probably the largest in the world now, right next to North Korea. And if you don't know, now you know. And again, welcome everyone to the live stream. Give it up for your new chairman of the SEC, Nippinator.